When we're talking about performance management, there's all different models and coaching templates on how to do a performance review. But when it comes down to it is, where are we at? Where are we going? Where do we need some work, some reroute, some support? And how are we going to get there? What does success look like? And I want to go back to the meeting foundation template before we jump into the different work styles and how to support them through this performance review. So the meeting template can apply to performance reviews as well. We don't need to overcomplicate it. One, what is the purpose, right? So what are the goals, the metrics that you had set for them this year? If you didn't have that this year, very objectively, which means depending on what person is viewing this, they still know what success looks like. It shouldn't be subjectively. I want you to identify that in the upcoming year if you haven't done that already. So metrics that move. I want you to think about metrics within your department, within your operation, but also behavioral metrics that move. So that's cross-functional team collaboration, milestone delivery. Were we on time throughout the year? And alignment scores. Were you working towards the goal all year long or just at the end, that procrastination effect? So what is the purpose, the metrics, the goals? The second thing is I want you to have time slots. These performance reviews are going to spend a lot of time in the praise section and not so much in the negative feedback or constructive coaching, the development phase. A performance review should be all about coaching. How do we move forward? How do we redefine what success looks like between you and me so we can bring that clarity to us? A lot of time is spent in positive feedback, what went well, because we're uncomfortable with constructive feedback. Now, constructive feedback doesn't have to be this bogged down, dumping on them type of conversation. It can actually be, what do you want from this role? Where are we going, right? So it's more purposeful than a dump on conversation. So we have a purpose, we have a goal, we have some metrics to talk about where maybe we got derailed there. We have time slots for all these type of conversations within those metrics and those goals. And then I want some action owners, due dates for the upcoming year. We like to leave that for like the last 5 minutes, or we don't leave time for that at all. And then we just do it via email. And again, that's where the clarity starts to decrease. That's where assumptions are made. So we want to make sure that we're being very intentional with this conversation. Those 3 meeting foundations can also be applied to performance reviews, right? The purpose, the goal, the metrics. We have time slots for the whole conversation, and we leave time for action owners. What's next? Let's go into the next year. And the reason why I say that is most of the time, bosses or leaders are leading this performance conversation, and they should be in coach mode. They should be stepping back and listening to what were the hurdles, where do they want to go, what ideas do they have, where were the gaps in our department that they can see where we could gain efficiencies, right? So they're still facilitating the conversation and they're leading them, they're developing them, but really the employee is driving it. And that's key because that's where autonomy comes in, that's where natural motivation and energy comes in. When an employee knows the foundations of this meeting, they know what's next. They can prepare for it. Now, performance reviews are naturally a stressful situation. In HR, I'm like ready for it because I do it all the time, but people will come into the office or they'll come into the leader's office and be nervous automatically. They assume the worst. They're being evaluated. This conversation might be linked to financial merit increases, promotions, what's next, what is something that maybe I missed. So a lot of people go into performance reviews in a stress state. So I want to go over the DISC work style stress states so you can meet them where they're at, either in the prep for this conversation or during the conversation when you start seeing the behaviors come out. What do they need so that they can feel at ease? Because we all know when someone's at ease, they're more open to the conversation than if they're defensive. So let's go through D's. D's are our dominants. They are our reds. And if they're being really restless or bold, demanding of you, they might be even getting defensive of defending their metrics or putting blame on other departments for their delays. I want you to understand some of the solution steps so that you can guide them in the performance review in a very results-oriented way. Understanding where are these delays, because they are probably true and going to be effective to moving your operation into this nice workflow, but you need to guide them into a solution type of discussion on it. So understand those delays and getting them out of that blame game is going to be important. And then what are the pieces that they can control? D's like to dominate. If they want to get to results fast, and if there's a hurdle in their way, they're going to want to solve that hurdle or skip the other person that might be in charge of that hurdle. So refocusing them on the steps in their control and what they can guide is going to be important during this conversation, because they like to overstep into areas that maybe they shouldn't be. And then creating practical and actionable steps forward that are in micro milestones, because D's like to move very fast, faster than all the rest of the work styles. Breaking them up into smaller actionable steps will help them feel like they are hitting a result faster, even though the long goal has a bigger stretchway there. They're going to feel like they're hitting the results faster and not be kind of pulling people with them, rushing them through the process. So creating smaller milestones as you create their development plan for next year is also going to be important. So D's are going to be a little bit more defensive, fast movers. So in order to slow them down, get back up, see the whole picture, understand where the delays are coming from, and some actionable steps to start removing those challenges and hurdles that are within their control. Now, I's are our yellows, and those are our social bunnies. They like to have a voice. So I want you to remember that. If you are doing a majority of the talking in this conversation, they will start shutting down. They will be getting defensive or silent. And that's not a great place for them to be. That's a stress state. They won't be contributing their best work after this meeting or into the upcoming year. So we want to make sure that you are being very structured in this conversation so that it doesn't get into all these black holes and discussion and conversation that I's naturally go to. You want to make sure that there's space for them to have a voice, and that there's areas for ideas and solutions. So I's will want to start problem solving anything that they need to improve upon, or you start talking about their development for next year or plans for next year, and they'll want to start jumping into that. You're going to want to guide them into a very constructive brainstorming session, because that's where they thrive. That's where their energy is. But also realize they are also fast movers. Our I's will act on that the moment that they step out of that meeting. So you want to be very clear on when to approach things. If other conversations need to be had before they move forward, you want to make sure that is clear so they're not running with something they shouldn't be. And again, giving them space to talk through what's going on, their challenges, their hurdles, why they didn't hit those metrics, why they did hit those metrics, giving them a lot of voice time. So I want you to really step back with I's and listen, but keep that meeting on structured time. Now, also remember that I's are your people persons. So they are just as worried about others as they are themselves. So they might even be talking about other team members instead of themselves. And you want to guide that conversation back towards them, because that's who you're meeting with. That's whose performance review you're going over. And just realign them back to self and what's in their control, and not worried about everyone else. Certainly allow them that voice to speak up about it, but it's their performance review. Realign them to their performance and where they want to go. Now, S's are, again, supportive, also people persons, and they're more worried about the conflict that's going to happen in this performance review. So they're going to be very silent compared to your I's, compared to your D's. They're also very methodical. So they want to think. They're your reflectives. So they might not say a whole lot during your meeting that you have, but they may say a lot 2 days from now. So great way to actually support S's, which is our supportives, our greens, is to give them their performance review, maybe via email or via paper. Even a shorter conversation, like 15 minutes, and a longer conversation 2 days after that, because they want to reflect on the information. And you're going to have a much better discussion if they have already reviewed the material. Now, why I recommend maybe a quick 15-minute conversation over the paper is S's will create a whole story in their head of stress, because they are conflict avoidance. So if you write something for constructive criticism or something they can work on, they will ruminate on that. They will create all these stories in their head, go through all the different events that might have contributed to it, and show up to this meeting, just catastrophize the whole thing, when maybe it's, hey, you just got to use the system in our operations more, right? A simple switch. But they will catastrophize it, and it's because they're in that conflict avoidance type of mode. So when you have a 15-minute conversation, you can really clear up anything that might be written, because you have to remember the impact of communication through words, which means something written on a piece of paper, is only 7%. So your voice, that body language, what they're seeing in your facial expressions, that is a longer impact of your communication than the words on the paper, right? So they're not going to catastrophize something if you're explaining it to them face to face. So you could say, hey, let's have 15 minutes for just going into your performance review so you can reflect, you can think about things, and we can have a really good discussion in 2 days on it. Then schedule your hour performance review. Now, if you're doing one-on-ones throughout the year, which is my preference if you've seen my other content, this isn't as such a big conversation. But if you're still doing the traditional once-a-year performance reviews, I want you to prep S's because they're not going to do a whole lot in that conversation without some prep so they can reflect on it. Now let's go over to C's. C's are our compliance, our blues. They're very data analytical detailed. So if you don't have objective, firm metrics in their performance review, I want you to make sure that they have objective, firm metrics for the next year coming up, because they're seeking input if they're hitting the mark or they're not based off of this data. And this data, it shouldn't be subjective. It shouldn't be assumptions. It shouldn't be made up dates because they don't drive on that. That's not where their energy thrives. They want low risk, right? They don't want a lot of change. So if this is the metric we're going to hit, they're looking at all the steps to make sure that we hit that. If you change, if that was just a made up due date, a made up number, their motivation doesn't drive that way because it's just a guess. And so when you can have more firm metrics about what this metric means to where we are going, what this due date means to where we're going, they will be more motivated to move forward. So include some planning in the upcoming year. Include some reroute planning from maybe the derails that happened this year. As much data and detail you can bring to this conversation, the more comfortable that they're going to be. Now, similar to S's or greens, they are also reflective. So you can have a quick 15-minute conversation, provide some of the data metrics that you want to talk about, and brainstorm ideas then during the discussion 2 days later after they've reflected on some of that data and details. Now, C's might not commit to something in that discussion, but I do want you to give them a due date. I want you to get them to commit to something for next year off of a metric, off of a data. Because C's are indecisive and they don't like all that risk, they might not commit, not because they're not committed, it's because they're indecisive. They're not sure if the steps that we are talking about right now is going to get them to the metrics. So give them time to really chew on what you discussed during this performance review before they commit to their development plan. Now, do you see where the 4 work styles are very different? So if I'm a leader and I'm applying the same performance review to all my team members, which there needs to be some kind of consistency, right? Because we want to measure everyone fairly. But if you're applying your discussion techniques, your coaching techniques, the same across those 4 work styles, some of that's not going to mesh well, right? You're either rushing them, maybe you're not clarifying things enough, you're not challenging them enough, you're not hitting them where their natural motivators and productivity and drivers come from. So if you're looking for that performance review that just guides their behavior towards that optimization, you need to know their work style. Are they a fast mover? Are they methodical? Do they need data and details? Do they need space to just voice their opinions, their brainstorming, their ideas? When you can meet people where they're at in their work style, you can see that natural energy come out, that flow state where they actually get excited for the work that they do, for the value that they bring, and for the upcoming year of what they might be able to achieve. Let's connect for your DISC assessment, for your team, for the individuals on your team to unlock this performance potential and reclaim the energy.